Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the blood-soaked chaos of medieval history, where the most savage peoples carved their names into legend with swords, screams, and sheer terror. Picture yourself standing on a windswept steppe, the air thick with dust kicked up by 1,000 hooves. The ground shakes as a horde charges, their eyes wild, their blades glinting under a merciless sun. You're not just witnessing history, you're in it. And let's be real, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the 13th century, and the Mongols are coming. Their empire, sprawling from the Pacific to the Caspian Sea, isn't just big, it's the largest land empire ever, swallowing 9 million square miles. You hear their horses before you see them. A thunderous rumble that makes your bones vibrate. The Mongols, under Genghis Khan, aren't just warriors. They're a force of nature. Their tactics are brutal, but brilliant feigned retreats, lightning-fast cavalry charges, and psychological warfare that leaves enemies trembling. They'd send terrified refugees ahead of their armies, spreading panic like wildfire. One quirky tidbit, they sometimes used flaming camel carcasses as siege weapons, lobbing them over city walls to freak everyone out. Imagine the smell burnt hair and despair. Historians still argue whether Genghis's body count, estimated at 40 million, was exaggerated or just another Tuesday for him. You're riding with a Mongol scouting party now, your horse barely keeping up. Their composite bows, small but deadly, can pierce armor from 300 yards. You watch a warrior knock an arrow mid-gallop, his aim steady as death itself. These guys don't just fight, they live for it. Their diet mare's milk, dried meat, and sometimes their own horse's blood keeps them lean and mean. You're starving just thinking about it, right? But here's the kicker, they're not mindless brutes. They build a postal system, the Yam, stretching thousands of miles, with relay stations every 20 miles. It's like medieval FedEx, but with more yelling and fewer delivery fees. As you crest a hill, you see a city in the distance, Samarkand, maybe, or Bukhara. The Mongols don't bother with long sieges. They'll divert rivers to flood defenses, or just slaughter everyone until the survivors beg to surrender. You're wondering if you'd wave a white flag, or just run. Spoiler, running doesn't work. Their horses are faster, and they love the chase. A dark joke floats through your mind, what's worse than a Mongol horde? A Mongol horde with a grudge. You wince, knowing grudges are their specialty. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the steppe. You're exhausted, your thighs aching from riding, your heart pounding from the sheer intensity of these warriors. They don't stop, don't sleep, don't care. You're just trying to keep up. But the Mongols are already planning their next conquest. You glance back at the horizon, wondering how anyone could stand against this storm. Spoiler alert, most didn't. You're no longer on the endless steppe, dodging Mongol hooves. Now, you're clinging to the edge of a longship. The salty North Sea spray stinging your face as you sail with Vikings. It's the 9th century, and these Norse raiders are the terror of every coastline from Ireland to Byzantium. The ship creaks, its dragon-headed prow slicing through waves like a blade through butter. You're freezing, your hands raw from gripping the oars. But the Vikings around you, they're grinning, their beards flecked with ice, eyes gleaming with the promise of plunder. You're wondering if you'll make it to shore or if you're just along for the ride. Probably both. The Vikings' reputation as savage raiders is no myth. They hit like a storm, targeting monasteries like Lindisfarne in 793, kicking off the Viking Age with a massacre that shocked Christian Europe. Monks didn't stand a chance. Picture you trying to fend off a 7-foot Norseman with nothing but a prayer book. Their longships, sleek and shallow, let them slip up rivers to strike deep inland, places no one thought raiders could reach. You're rowing past a quiet village now, and you can almost hear the screams that'll come at dawn. A quirky tidbit: Vikings sometimes used ravens to navigate, releasing them to see which way land lay. If the bird didn't come back, they followed. Talk about trusting your gut and your feathers. You're on deck, watching a warrior sharpen his axe. These guys don't just fight, they perform. Their sagas boast of berserkers, warriors who'd whip themselves into a frenzy, possibly chugging hallucinogenic mushrooms before charging in half naked. Historians still argue whether berserkers were real or just epic poetry gone wild. But you're not keen to test the theory. That axe looks sharp enough to split your doubts in half. A grim joke pops into your head. Why don't Vikings use tinder? Because they'd burn the whole village down looking for a spark. The raid begins at first light. You're scrambling ashore, the village waking to chaos. Vikings don't just steal gold, they take livestock, grain, even people to sell as thralls. You're dodging a panicked villager, wondering if you'd rather be captured or left to starve. Their savagery isn't random, though. They're traders, too, hauling amber and furs to markets as far as Baghdad. You're picturing a Viking haggling over a camel, and it's almost funny, almost. Their Drakkar ships, like the one you're on, are engineering marvels, built to flex with the waves. You're impressed, but also seasick. As the raid ends, you're hauling loot back to the ship. The Vikings are laughing, passing around a horn of mead. But you're just trying not to trip over a stray chicken. The sun's rising higher, and you're already dreading the next raid. These Norsemen don't quit. Every horizon's just another target. You're starting to understand why their name alone sent kings running. Another dark chuckle. What do you call a Viking who's bad at raiding? A stay-at-home dad with a really sharp axe. The ship rocks gently now, the coast fading behind you. You're exhausted, salt-crusted, and wondering how these guys do this for years. The raven on the mast caws, and you're half convinced it's laughing at you. The Vikings are already planning the next hit, and you're just hoping for a nap. Remember those flaming camel carcasses from the Mongols? These guys would probably set the whole ship on fire just for fun. You've left the Viking longship behind, the sea's salty sting fading as you find yourself in the dusty chaos of the Holy Land. It's the late 11th century, and you're marching with Crusaders, their crosses gleaming on sun-scorched armor. The air smells of sweat and zeal, with chants of Deus Vult echoing across the desert. You're trudging through sand, your boots sinking as these warriors of faith charge toward Jerusalem, driven by a mix of devotion and bloodlust. You're wondering if you'll survive the next clash or just end up as a footnote in some monk's chronicle. The First Crusade, launched in 1096, is a brutal affair. It's not just knights, peasants, priests. Even kids join the march. believing they're on God's mission. They capture Jerusalem in 1099, but the victory's a slaughter, with tens of thousands killed in days. You're in the thick of it, dodging blades as Crusaders storm the city's walls. Their fervor is terrifying. They'll fight to the death. Convinced heaven's their reward, a quirky tidbit: some Crusaders carried relics, like bits of saints' bones, thinking they'd ward off danger. Spoiler, a finger bone doesn't stop an arrow. Historians still argue whether the Crusaders' motives were purely religious or just a land grab dressed in holy robes. You're ducking behind a crumbled wall now, watching a knight swing a mace like it's a holy sledgehammer. These guys aren't just fighting Saracens. They're clashing with each other over who gets the best loot. You're thinking of that Mongol camel-flinging trick. Crusaders probably would have tried tossing sacred candles instead. A dry chuckle hits you. Why don't Crusaders play chess? Because they'd smite the board for being too pagan. The heat's brutal, and you're parched. But the Crusaders keep going, fueled by sermons and sheer stubbornness. Their tactics are messy but effective. You see them build siege towers, rickety but tall, rolling toward city walls like wooden giants. Archers cover the advance, their arrows buzzing like angry wasps. You're wondering how anyone keeps faith when the ground's soaked red. Some Crusaders, called Taffers, are so fanatical they eat their enemy's flesh to scare the rest. You're hoping that's just a rumor, but the glint in their eyes says otherwise. Another grim joke. What's a Crusader's favorite snack? Anything. As long as it's not a salad. The camp at night is no better. You're huddled by a fire, listening to soldiers argue over relics and glory. Their chainmail clinks like loose change, and you're exhausted just watching them polish their swords. The Crusaders' savagery isn't just against foes, they'll turn on locals. Even Christians, if supplies run low. You're starting to see why the Viking raids felt almost polite compared to this. Their faith makes them unstoppable, but also blind, hacking through anyone in their path. You're wondering if you'd rather face a Viking axe or a Crusader's sermon. Tough call. As dawn breaks, you're back on the march, the desert stretching endlessly. The Crusaders sing psalms, but their hands stay on their swords. You're thinking of those Viking ravens, wishing one could fly you out of here. The Crusade's only getting bloodier, and you're just trying to keep your head, literally. The Holy Land feels less holy by the minute, and you're already bracing for what's next. You've escaped the Crusaders' dusty zeal, trading sun-scorched sands for the rolling plains of the 5th century. Now, you're galloping with the Huns, the wind whipping your face as their horses churn the earth into a storm of dust. It's the twilight of the Roman Empire. And these steppe nomads, led by Attila, are tearing through its defenses like a knife through parchment. You're clinging to a horse, your heart pounding as you try to keep up with warriors who live in the saddle. Their laughter is wild, their eyes sharp, and you're pretty sure they'd eat the horse you're riding if they got hungry enough. The Huns' rampage is legendary. By 451, they're smashing through Gaul, leaving a trail of burned villages and terrified Romans. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains sees them face a desperate Roman-Visigoth alliance, with tens of thousands falling in a single day. You're weaving through the chaos, arrows hissing past, as Huns charge with terrifying precision. Their short-truss, curved bows fire faster than you can blink, and they're masters of hit-and-run tactics. A quirky tidbit: Huns sometimes stitch their wounds shut with horsehair. which sounds like a medieval DIY disaster. Historians still argue whether Attila's sudden death in 453 from a nosebleed or poison saved Europe or just delayed the inevitable. You're riding beside a Hun warrior now, his face scarred, his grin feral. These guys don't just fight, they terrorize. They demand tribute from cities, then sack them anyway if the mood struck. You're thinking of those flaming Mongol camels. Huns would probably just set the whole town on fire and call it a warm-up. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't Huns write letters? Because their idea of diplomacy is a severed head in a sack. Your horse stumbles, and you're praying it doesn't go down. Falling means your lunch for the vultures circling above. Their lifestyle is as brutal as their battles. You're choking on dust, living off dried meat and fermented mare's milk, which tastes like regret. The Huns move like a swarm, their camp's a mess of tents and stolen loot. You're dodging a kid practicing archery on a moving horse, because apparently they start young. Their mobility is their strength. They don't build cities, they destroy them. You're starting to see why Romans called them barbarians, though you're not sure who's more savage, the Huns or the Empire taxing its people into starvation. Night falls, and you're crouched by a fire. The Huns swapping stories in a guttural tongue you can't follow. Their horses are tethered nearby, snorting in the dark, and you're wondering how they keep going without sleep. You're exhausted, your thighs screaming from riding. But the Huns are already planning tomorrow's raid. Another dark joke. What's a Hun's favorite bedtime story? The one where everyone else loses. You're thinking of the Viking raven navigation trick. Huns wouldn't need it. They'd just follow the trail of screams. The stars are bright, but the air feels heavy with the promise of more violence. You're starting to understand why the Huns were Rome's nightmare. They don't just conquer, they erase. You're hoping for a break, but the hoofbeats in the distance say otherwise. The Huns are restless, and you're just along for the ride, wondering how much longer you can keep up. You've left the Huns' thundering hooves behind, their dust clouds fading as you find yourself in the muddy fields of 7th century Britain. You're trudging with an Anglo-Saxon war band, your boots squelching in the mire, the air thick with the stench of damp wool and iron. These Saxons are no polished knights. They're gritty, bearded warriors, their shields chipped, their swords nicked from countless brawls. You're in the thick of a feud, probably over some stolen cows or a drunken insult. And you're wondering if you'll make it through the next clash without a spear in your gut. The Anglo-Saxons' battles are brutal, personal affairs. By 600, they're carving out kingdoms like Wessex and Mercia, fighting each other as often as they fight the Britons. The Battle of Hatfield Chase in 633 sees King Edwin of Northumbria cut down, his army slaughtered by a rival coalition. You're dodging blows in the chaos, the ground slick with mud and worse. Their shield walls are tight, spears jabbing like a porcupine's quills, and you're just trying not to trip. A quirky tidbit: some Saxons believed swords had souls. Naming them like pets, imagine calling your blade Skull Splitter and whispering to it before bed. Historians still argue whether their pagan roots or Christian conversions drove their ferocity more. You're shoulder to shoulder with a warrior now, his breath reeking of ale. These guys fight for glory, land, and sometimes just because it's Tuesday. Their mead halls are loud with boasts. But out here, it's all grunts and curses. You're thinking of those Hun horsehair stitches Saxons would probably just slap some mud on a wound, and call it healed. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't Saxons play cards? They'd eat the deck thinking it was bread. Your shield's heavy, and you're already regretting signing up for this. Oh, wait, you didn't. Their warfare is raw. You see them wield sea axes, long knives that hack through armor like it's leather. They're not above ambushing at night or burning rival villages into ash. You're running through a forest now, branches snapping as your band chases a fleeing enemy. It's less a battle, more a hunt. They don't take prisoners unless they're worth a ransom. And you're hoping you look poor enough to be ignored? Their societies built on loyalty betray your lord. And you're worse than dead. You're picturing a Viking raid, all flashy and fast. This feels grittier, like a bar fight that never ends. Nightfall, and you're in a smoky hall, the fire casting shadows on warriors swapping tales of blood feuds. Someone's strumming a lyre, but it's drowned out by arguments over who killed more foes. You're exhausted, your arms aching from holding a shield all day. But these Saxons are still bickering. Another dark joke. What's an Anglo-Saxon's favorite hobby, starting a feud that lasts 3 generations? You're thinking of those Crusader relics Saxons would probably trade a saint's bone for a sharper sword. The fire's dying, and you're curled up on a straw mat. The hall snores rumbling like distant thunder. The Saxons are already planning tomorrow's fight, and you're just hoping for a moment's peace. Their world is all sharp edges, blades, loyalties, and grudges. You're starting to see why their songs are all about death and glory. And you're not sure which is worse. You've slipped away from the Anglo-Saxon mead hall. Its smoky din fading as you find yourself on the windswept plains of 9th century Europe. You're riding with the Magyars, horse archers whose arrows whistle like death itself. The air smells of leather and horse sweat, and your thighs burn from clinging to a galloping steed. These nomads, fresh from the steppes, are raiding with a speed that makes your head spin. You're dodging branches in a forest, heart racing, as the Magyars swoop down on a sleeping village like hawks on a henhouse. You're not sure if you're more scared of them or the chaos they're about to unleash. The Magyars' raids are a nightmare for Europe. By the 890s, they're hitting monasteries, towns, and even armies, using lightning-fast cavalry to outmaneuver lumbering Frankish knights. Their sack of Verona in 899 leaves the city a smoldering ruin, with thousands dead or enslaved. You're in the middle of a raid now, arrows flying as villagers scream. The Magyars' composite bows, like the Mongols you remember, shoot farther and faster than anything Europe's seen. A quirky tidbit, they'd sometimes tie bells to their horses to spook enemies, turning a charge into a jangling terror show. Historians still argue whether their raids were pure plunder or a calculated push for tribute and power. You're galloping beside a Magyar warrior, his face painted with streaks of dirt, his grin wild. These guys don't just raid. They vanish before anyone can fight back. You're thinking of those Viking ravens. Magyars probably don't need them. They navigate by instinct and carnage. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't Magyars send invites to their raids? Because our Inatsat are said VPing with an arrow's faster. Your horse is panting, and you're just trying to stay upright as the village burns behind you. Their lifestyle is relentless. You're living off dried meat and stolen wine, sleeping under the stars with one eye open. The Magyars move like a storm, their camps packed up in hours. You're dodging a kid practicing archery. Yep, they start young. just like the Huns. Their horses are their lives. They'd sooner starve than let their mounts go hungry. You're picturing a Crusaders' siege tower. Magyars would laugh, circle it, and shoot it to splinters. Their savagery isn't just violence, it's strategy, keeping Europe on edge for decades. Nightfall, and you're by a flickering fire. The Magyars sharpening arrows and joking in a tongue you can't follow. The horses snort nearby, and you're wondering how they keep this pace. Another dark joke, what's a Magyar's favorite game, hide and seek. Where you're always it, you're exhausted, your hands blistered from rains. But the Magyars are already scouting the next target. You're starting to see why kings paid them to go away when they weren't running in terror. The stars gleam above, cold and distant. As the camp quiets, you're curled up on the ground, the grass damp under you, and you're thinking of those Saxon feuds. Magyars don't bother with grudges. They just keep moving, striking, vanishing. You're hoping for a moment's rest, but the distant jingle of horse bells says otherwise. The Magyars are restless, and you're just along for the ride, praying you don't fall behind. You've left the Magyars' jangling horse bells behind, their fleeting raids dissolving into the dust as you find yourself in the torchlit chaos of 12th century Europe. You're standing among knights, their armor clanking, their faces grim under dented helmets. The air smells of oiled steel and ambition, and you're caught in the middle of a tournament-turned deadly brawl. These knights, draped in chivalry, are supposed to be noble, but their savagery shines through as lances splinter and swords clash. You're dodging a stray horse, wondering if you'll get trampled before the day's out or just skewered for sport. Knights dominate medieval warfare, their heavy cavalry defining battles like Hastings in 1066, where William the Conqueror's knights crushed Anglo-Saxon shields to claim England. You're in a melee now, the ground shaking as armored men charge, their war horses snorting steam, their code of chivalry honor, loyalty, protecting the weak sounds nice. But you're seeing it's more about who can swing the hardest. A quirky tidbit, some knights wore padded undergarments called akitans, which probably smelled like a wet dog after a week in the saddle. Historians still argue whether chivalry was a genuine ideal or just a fancy excuse for rich guys to bash each other's skulls. You're watching a knight, his visor down, slam a mace into another's shield, the crack echoing like thunder. These guys train for years, but in the heat of combat, it's raw bloodlust. You're thinking of those Mongol camel carcasses knights would probably joust with them just to prove a point. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't knights use dating apps? They'd challenge their matches to a duel by dawn. Your arms ache just imagining hefting their chainmail, and you're glad you're not the squire scrubbing it clean. Tournaments aren't just games, they're war rehearsals. You see knights go down, bones breaking, crowds roaring like it's a twisted festival. Some fights are outrants to the death, because why not make a party fatal? You're ducking as a lance flies wide, wondering if you'd rather face a Magyar arrow or this chaos. Knights also raid villages for supplies. Chivalry be damned. And you're picturing a Viking longship gliding away cleaner than this mess. Their feuds are personal insult to knight's honor, and you're on the wrong end of a broadsword. Night falls, and you're in a castle's great hall, the air thick with roast meat and boasting. Knights trade stories of their kills, their egos bigger than their shields. You're exhausted, your ears ringing from the day's clashes, but these guys are still itching for a fight. Another dark joke. What's a knight's favorite bedtime story, one where he's the only one left standing? You're thinking of those Saxon sword names knights probably whisper to their lances, too. The firelight dims, and you're curled up on a straw pallet. The castle's stone walls cold against your back. The knights are planning tomorrow's tourney, and you're just hoping for a moment's peace. Their world is all about glory, but it's built on bruises and blood. You're starting to see why their shining armor hides such a savage heart. And you're bracing for what's next. You've slipped out of the knight's clanging great hall, the boasts of chivalry fading as you stumble into the muddy chaos of a 14th century peasant revolt. You're in the thick of a mob, pitchforks and scythes raised, the air heavy with sweat and desperation. These aren't trained warriors, just starving serfs. Their faces gaunt, their eyes burning with rage against lords who tax them into the dirt. You're clutching a stick, hoping it passes for a weapon, as the crowd surges toward a manor house. You're wondering if you'll get crushed in the stampede or just skewered by a knight's lance. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 in England is a bloody explosion of pent-up fury. Sparked by a poll tax, it sees thousands of serfs storm London, beheading nobles and burning records. You're in the middle of it, dodging flaming torches as rebels smash everything symbolizing their oppression. Their weapons are makeshift farm tools, stolen knives, but their anger makes them lethal. A quirky tidbit, some rebels believed a mythical John Ball prophecy that they'd overthrow the king and live free, like medieval fan fiction gone wild. Historians still argue whether these uprisings were doomed outbursts or near misses at real change. You're running beside a wiry farmer, his hands calloused, his voice hoarse from shouting. These peasants aren't just fighting for food. They're after dignity, which makes their savagery raw and personal. You're thinking of those nightly tournaments fancy, but less desperate than this. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't peasants start a book club? Because they'd burn the books to keep warm. Your stick feels useless as you see a manor gate splinter under a barrage of stones and fury. Their tactics are chaotic, but effective. You watch rebels overwhelm a lone knight, his armor no match for a dozen pitchforks. They don't hold ground, they swarm, destroy, and scatter. You're dodging a falling beam as the manor catches fire, the heat searing your face. These serfs aren't trained, but hunger's a great motivator. You're picturing a Magyar raid. All speed and arrows, this is slower, messier, but no less brutal. Some rebels even turn on each other, squabbling over looted bread. You're hoping you don't look like a lord in disguise. Night falls, and you're hiding in a ditch. The mob's shouts fading into eerie quiet. The air smells of smoke and blood, and you're shivering, wondering if the rebels will win or just die trying. Another dark joke. What's a peasant's favorite dance? The one where they trample their lord's crops. You're thinking of those Hun horsehair stitches peasants would probably just use rage to patch their wounds. The stars are out, but the glow of burning manors lights the horizon. You're exhausted, your hands blistered from gripping your stick, but the rebels are still moving, planning their next target. Their savagery comes from desperation, not glory, and it hits harder than a knight's mace. You're starting to see why lords feared these uprisings, trained or not. A mob this angry is a force of nature. You're just hoping to slip away before the king's army shows up. You've crawled out of the peasant revolt's smoky ditch. The rebels' shouts fading as you find yourself on a rickety ship, the sea churning beneath you. It's the 13th century, and you're sailing with medieval pirates. The waves crashing against a creaking hull. The air smells of salt and tar, and you're gripping the rail, trying not to puke as the ship lurches. These sea dogs, part thief, part mercenary prey on merchant vessels, their eyes glinting with greed. You're wondering if you'll survive the next raid or end up as shark bait. Pirates like the sea beggars of the North Sea are a menace, disrupting trade routes and sinking ships for profit. By the 1200s, they're hitting cogs loaded with wool and wine, leaving coastal towns trembling. You're in a raid now, the pirate crew shouting as they close in on a fat merchant ship. Their grappling hooks fly, and you're scrambling aboard, dodging panicked sailors. A quirky tidbit, some pirates used false beacons to lure ships onto rocks, like medieval scam artists with a lighthouse fetish. Historians still argue whether pirates were just criminals or rebels sticking it to greedy merchants. You're next to a grizzled pirate, his knife between his teeth, scaling the merchant ship's rigging. These guys don't just steal, they terrorize, sometimes tossing crews overboard to save time. You're thinking of those Viking longships, sleek and deadly. These pirate ships are scrappier, but just as ruthless. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't pirates use GPS? They'd rather sink the ship than ask for directions. Your hands are slick with spray, and you're praying you don't slip into the freezing sea. Their tactics are brutal efficiency. You see them hack through ropes, disable sails, and loot anything shiny. They're not above ransoming rich passengers, and you're hoping you look poor enough to ignore. The merchant ship's crew surrenders, but some pirates keep swinging, just for fun. You're picturing a knight's tournament polished chaos compared to this wet, bloody mess. These pirates don't care about glory. It's all about the haul. You're dodging a barrel someone kicked over, wondering if you'd rather face a peasant's pitchfork. Night falls, and you're back on the pirate ship, the deck swaying under a starry sky. The crew's divvying up loot coins, cloth, even a fancy goblet while passing around sour ale. You're exhausted, your clothes soaked. But these pirates are already eyeing the horizon for the next score. Another dark joke, what's a pirate's favorite song? The one where everyone walks the plank. You're thinking of those Magyar bells pirates would probably just ring the ship's bell to mock their victims. The sea's calm now, but the air feels heavy with the promise of more raids. You're curled up in a damp corner, the ship's creaks lulling you, but the pirates' laughter keeps you on edge. Their savagery is all about survival out here. It's sink or swim, and they've chosen to sink everyone else. You're starting to see why merchants prayed for calm seas and no sails on the horizon. You're just hoping for a dry spot to sleep before the next chase begins. Section 10. You've left the pirate ship's swaying deck. The sea's salty tang fading as you slip into the shadowed alleys of 12th century Persia. You're stalking through a moonlit bazaar, the air thick with the scent of sandalwood and fear. You're tailing a member of the Order of Assassins, a secretive sect whose name alone makes rulers sweat. Their daggers are silent, their motives murky, and you're wondering if you'll spot their next move or just feel a blade between your ribs. These guys don't fight in open battles, they strike from the shadows, and you're trying to keep up without becoming a target. The assassins, or Hashashin, are infamous for their targeted killings, especially during the Crusades. They take out key figures like Conrad of Montferrat in 1192, leaving no trace but a corpse and a legend. You're creeping along a rooftop now, watching a cloaked figure vanish into the crowd. Their training is brutal years of stealth, poison, and disguise, all for a single, perfect strike. A quirky tidbit, rumors swirl they used hashish to inspire their killers, though that might just be enemy propaganda to paint them as drugged-up lunatics. Historians still argue whether the assassins were religious zealots or political masterminds, using faith as a cover. You're following your mark through a narrow street, heart pounding as you dodge sleeping merchants. These assassins don't mess around one wrong step, and you're done. You're thinking of those pirate grappling hooks, crude compared to this surgical precision. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't assassins throw parties? Because the guest list gets fatally short. Your cloak snags on a crate, and you freeze, praying no one noticed. Their hideouts, like Alamet Castle, are fortresses perched in mountains, unreachable unless you're invited or suicidal. Their methods are chilling. You hear whispers of poison-tipped blades and sleeper agents who blend in for years before striking. You're watching one now, slipping a note under a door, orders, maybe, or a warning. They don't just kill, they terrorize, making enemies paranoid. You're picturing a knight's clanking armor useless against a dagger in the dark. The assassin's savagery is quiet, calculated, and somehow scarier than a Mongol charge. You're hoping you're not on their list, but their eyes seem to see everything. Night deepens, and you're hiding in a doorway. The bazaar quiet except for distant dogs barking. The assassin's gone. But you feel watched, your skin prickling. Another dark joke. What's an assassin's favorite game? Hide and seek, where you never get to seek. You're thinking of those peasant rebels' raw anger. This is colder, more deliberate. The air's heavy with intrigue, and you're exhausted, your nerves frayed from tiptoeing through this deadly dance. You're curled up in a shadowed corner, the stone cool against your back, trying to blend into the night. The assassins are out there, planning their next hit, and you're just hoping to stay invisible. Their world is all whispers and blades, and you're starting to understand why their name became a synonym for murder. You're praying for dawn, but in this darkness, it feels a long way off. Section 11. You've slipped away from the assassin's shadowy bazaar, the chill of their daggers fading as you find yourself marching through a muddy camp in 13th century Germany. You're with a band of mercenaries, their armor mismatched, their faces scarred from battles fought for coin, not glory. The air reeks of damp leather and cheap ale, and you're clutching a borrowed spear, trying to blend in. These sellswords live for chaos, signing up with whoever pays best, and you're wondering if you'll survive their next job or get stiffed on your share of the loot. Mercenaries, like the free companies, are a medieval plague, fighting for lords, cities, or anyone with gold. By the 1300s, they're infamous for ravaging Italy, with groups like the White Company sacking towns for profit. You're in a skirmish now, dodging arrows as your band clashes with another over a disputed castle. Their weapons are a hodgepodge rusty swords, stolen maces, but they swing with vicious skill. A quirky tidbit, some mercenaries carried war hammers designed to dent knightly armor, like a medieval can opener. Historians still argue whether these men were just greedy opportunists or desperate souls with no other trade. You're next to a grizzled sellsword, his grin missing teeth as he hacks through a rival's shield. These guys don't care about loyalty, switch sides mid-battle, and they'll toast to it later, You're thinking of those assassin blades, silent but clean compared to this messy brawl. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't mercenaries start unions? They'd rob their own strike fund. Your spear's heavy, and you're hoping you don't have to use it. But the shouting and blood say otherwise. Their tactics are pure chaos. You see them feign retreats to lure enemies into traps, then swarm like wolves. They don't hold land, they bleed it dry, looting villages when pay runs low. You're dodging a flaming pitch barrel someone lobbed, probably for fun. You're picturing a Viking raid, all speed and purpose. This feels like a bar fight with better weapons. Some mercenaries even ransom their own comrades if the price is right. You're hoping you look too broke to bother. Night falls, and you're in their camp, the firelight glinting off stolen silver. The mercenaries are laughing, divvying up coins while arguing over who stabbed who first. You're exhausted, your hands blistered from the spear. But these guys are already planning the next fight. Another dark joke. What's a mercenary's retirement plan? A quick death or a quicker betrayal? You're thinking of those nightly Akatons mercenaries probably just wear whatever they stole. The camp's a mess of tents and curses. And you're starting to see why lords hired these brutes, but never trusted them. You're curled up on a damp blanket, the ground hard under you, the snores of drunken sellswords rumbling nearby. Their savagery is all about survival, no cause, no honor, just gold. You're wondering how they sleep so soundly after days like this. The fire's dying, but the promise of tomorrow's bloodshed keeps the air tense. You're just hoping to slip through this job without a blade in your back. You've stumbled out of the mercenaries' rowdy camp. The clink of stolen coins fading as you find yourself Batsiv in a torchlit street in 13th century Spain. You're creeping through a city under the Inquisition's grip. The air heavy with incense and paranoia. Zealots in dark robes patrol, their eyes scanning for heretics. And you're trying to keep your head down, clutching a cloak to blend in. The Spanish Inquisition, starting in 1231, hunts anyone who strays from the church's line: Jews, Muslims, even Christians with the wrong ideas. You're wondering if you'll slip past their nets or end up chained in a dungeon, confessing to crimes you didn't commit. The Inquisition's savagery is methodical. By the 1200s, they're rooting out Cathars in southern France, burning hundreds at stakes after the Albigensian Crusade. You're in a crowded square now, watching a trembling heretic face a tribunal. Their tools are chilling interrogations, torture, public burnings, all to save souls, they claim. A quirky tidbit: some inquisitors carried portable torture kits, like medieval briefcases of pain. Historians still argue whether the Inquisition was about faith or just a power grab to control a fracturing society. You're slipping through an alley, heart pounding as you hear a scream from a nearby cellar. These zealots don't just hunt, they terrify, making neighbors snitch on each other. You're thinking of those assassin daggers, silent but personal. This is colder, more bureaucratic. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't inquisitors play hide and seek? Because they'd burn the house down to find you. Your cloak's hood is up, but you feel exposed. Every passerby a potential informer. Their methods are relentless. You see a crowd gathered for an auto-da-fe, a public act of faith where penitents are paraded, some to burn. The Inquisitors read charges like a twisted sermon, and you're dodging elbows to stay out of sight. You're picturing a mercenary's chaotic brawl. This is slower, more deliberate. but just as deadly. They use fear as a weapon, breaking spirits before bodies. You're hoping your accent doesn't give you away as an outsider. Night falls, and you're hiding in a cramped attic. The city's silence broken by distant chants. The air smells of wax and dread, and you're shivering despite the heat. Another dark joke. What's an inquisitor's favorite hobby? Collecting confessions like trading cards. You're thinking of those pirate false beacons. Inquisitors don't need tricks. They've got the church's blessing. The floorboards creak, and you freeze, praying it's just a rat. The Inquisition's reach feels endless, turning faith into a trap. You're curled up in the dark, the attic's beams pressing against your back. The zealots are out there, hunting, and you're just trying to breathe quietly. Their savagery is wrapped in righteousness, which makes it scarier than a mercenary's blade. You're starting to see why entire communities lived in fear, whispering prayers to avoid notice. Dawn's a long way off, and you're hoping to stay hidden until it comes. You've escaped the Inquisition's suffocating grip. The attic's shadows fading as you stumble into a muddy valley in 11th century Japan. You're caught in the chaos of a samurai warlord's raid. The air thick with the clang of steel and the stench of churned earth. These feudal clans, led by men like the Taira or Minamoto, fight for land and power, their katanas flashing under a gray sky. You're clutching a borrowed spear, trying to keep up with armored warriors whose loyalty is as sharp as their blades. You're wondering if you'll survive the next charge or just trip into a rice paddy and call it a day. The Genpei War of 1180-1185 is a bloodbath, with clans clashing to dominate Japan's fractured landscape. You're in a skirmish now, dodging arrows as samurai on horseback slice through rivals with terrifying precision. Their code, Bushido, demands honor. But out here, it's all about survival. A quirky tidbit, some samurai wore masks with fierce faces to scare enemies, like medieval cosplay with deadly stakes. Historians still argue whether Bushido was a true moral code or just a way to justify slaughter in the name of loyalty. You're running beside a samurai, his armor clattering, his eyes cold under a horned helmet. These guys live for battle, training from childhood to wield swords that can cut through bone like paper. You're thinking of those Inquisitor torture kits. Samurai don't need them. One swing's enough. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't samurai use social media? They'd settle every feud with a duel by sunrise. Your spear feels flimsy, and you're hoping you don't have to face one of their blades head on. Their tactics are brutal but disciplined. You see them use mounted archers to soften enemy lines, then charge with spears and swords in a coordinated wave. You're dodging a stray arrow, the ground slick with mud and blood. You're picturing a mercenary camp. All chaos and greed. This is sharper, more ritualistic, but no less savage. Clans don't just fight, they annihilate, leaving villages burned and rivals beheaded. You're hoping you look neutral enough to avoid a katana to the neck. Night falls, and you're in a warlord's camp, the firelight glinting off lacquered armor. The samurai are quiet, sharpening blades or praying to ancestors, their faces unreadable. You're exhausted, your hands raw from gripping the spear, but these warriors seem untouched by fatigue. Another dark joke. What's a samurai's favorite poem, one that ends with a head on a spike? You're thinking of those assassin hideouts. Samurai don't hide. They meet you in the open, daring you to fight. You're curled up on a straw mat, the camp's silence broken by distant horse whinnies. The air feels heavy with the promise of tomorrow's battle. Their savagery is bound by honor, but it's still a death sentence for anyone in their way. You're starting to see why these clans shape Japan's history in blood. And you're just hoping to slip through the next fight without losing your head literally. You've left the samurai's disciplined carnage behind. The clash of katanas fading as you find yourself in a plague-ravaged village in 14th century Europe. It's 1348, and the Black Death is tearing through the continent, leaving bodies stacked like firewood. You're stumbling through a muddy street, the air thick with the stench of decay and panic. Survivors turn savage, driven by fear and desperation, looting homes or attacking anyone who coughs. You're clutching a rag to your face, hoping it's enough to keep the pestilence at bay. But you're wondering if you'll survive the mob before the plague gets you. The Black Death kills up to 50 million people, nearly half of Europe's population, between 1347 and 1351. You're dodging a frenzied crowd now, some wielding clubs, others torching houses to cleanse the sickness. Their fear fuels violence. Flagellants whip themselves in public, believing pain appeases God, while others hunt scapegoats, blaming Jews or strangers for the plague. A quirky tidbit: some thought wearing garlic necklaces warded off the disease, like medieval aromatherapy gone wrong. Historians still argue whether the plague's chaos sparked social change or just amplified humanity's worst instincts. You're running beside a wild-eyed villager, his hands stained with ash, shouting about divine wrath. These people aren't warriors, but panic makes them deadly. You're thinking of those samurai masks, terrifying, but less unhinged than this mob. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't plague survivors play tag? Because everyone's already it. Your rag's damp with sweat, and you're praying it's not hiding a telltale cough. The village is a maze of screams and smoke, and you're just trying to stay upright. Their violence is chaotic, born of despair. You see a group smash a merchant's door, accusing him of hoarding food. Fights break out over scraps, and you're dodging a flung stone. You're picturing a mercenary brawl, greedy but organized. This is pure anarchy. Some turn to banditry, ambushing travelers for supplies, while others form cults, preaching the end of days. You're hoping you don't look worth robbing. But in this madness, anything's a target. Night falls, and you're hiding in a crumbling barn, the air heavy with the reek of rot. The mob's shouts echo in the distance, mingled with wails of grief. Another dark joke. What's a plague survivor's favorite song? Anything but Ring Around the Rosie. You're thinking of those inquisitor tribunals, terrifying, but at least they had rules. This is lawless. The barn's walls creak, and you're shivering, wondering if the next shadow is a looter or just death itself. You're curled up in the straw, the silence unnerving after the day's chaos. The plague's savagery isn't about swords or strategy. It's humanity unraveling, clawing for survival. You're starting to see why the Black Death didn't just kill bodies. It tore societies apart. You're hoping for a quiet dawn, but the distant crackle of fire says peace is a long way off. Section 15. You've stumbled out of the plague-ravaged village, the stench of death fading as you stand on a quiet hill, looking back at the medieval world's brutal tapestry. It's the late Middle Ages, and you're reflecting on the savage peoples you've crossed: Mongols, Vikings, Crusaders, and more, each leaving scars on history's hide. The wind carries the faint echo of hoofbeats and screams. But you're safe here. For now. Just watching the sun dip low. You're wondering if humanity's learned anything from all this bloodshed, or if we're just doomed to repeat it with shinier weapons. The Middle Ages, roughly 500 to 1500, are a crucible of violence, shaping borders and cultures through raw force. The 100 Years' War, ending in 1453, sees England and France batter each other for generations, leaving fields soaked and economies wrecked. You're imagining the clash of armies at Agincourt, where longbowmen turned knights into pincushions. A quirky tidbit: some medieval chroniclers claimed wolves grew fat on battlefields, picking through the carnage like furry scavengers. Historians still argue whether this era's savagery was a chaotic free-for-all or a grim necessity to forge order from collapse. You're walking through a ruined village now. Its charred timbers a reminder of the Mongols' firestorms or Viking raids you survived. Each group you've met: Huns, Magyars. Samurai had their own brand of brutality, from lightning raids to ritualized duels. You're thinking of those plague-driven mobs, their panic rawer than a knight's polished charge. A grim chuckle hits you. Why don't medieval folks write memoirs? Because no one lived long enough to finish the epilogue. The grass under your feet feels soft, but it's grown over graves, and you're treading lightly. Their legacy lingers in stories and scars. You see it in castle walls, built to withstand Magyar arrows, or in sagas that glorify Viking axes. The Crusaders' zeal, the assassins' daggers, the peasants' pitchforks, all fueled by the same human urge's power. Survival, faith. You're picturing a mercenary's greedy grin. Maybe they were the most honest, fighting for coin instead of cloaking it in honor. Another dark joke. What's a medieval historian's favorite puzzle one where all the pieces are stained red? You're starting to see why these centuries feel like a fever dream of blood and ambition. The sky darkens, and you're alone now. The hills quiet, wrapping around you like a blanket. The savagery you've witnessed isn't just history, it's a mirror, showing what happens when desperation or glory takes the reins. You're exhausted, your mind heavy with images of burning villages and flashing blades. But there's a strange calm in understanding it all. Those Saxon sword names, those pirate beacons, they're echoes of a world that's gone, but not forgotten. Wind down as you stand on this hill. The wind softens, carrying away the echoes of clashing steel and desperate cries. The stars begin to peek through the twilight, their light gentle, like a whisper promising rest. You let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders, each breath slower, deeper, as the medieval world fades into shadows. The Mongols' hoofbeats, the Vikings' oars, the samurai's blades, they're just stories now, drifting like leaves on a quiet stream. You're safe, wrapped in the present, where the only battle is finding the perfect pillow. Let the fire of those savage times dim, their chaos melting into a soft hum, like that fan you left on for comfort. Close your eyes, sink into the calm, and let sleep carry you gently away.